My father passed away, an event that, to my surprise, affected me deeply. From then on, everything became a lethargic routine until that very day. The man I was then, was he a happy man? I am not able to tell. When I try and recall the first 28 years of my life, my memories seem like fading words on old parchment. My reason tells me that I was blessed, in a way. The life of a priest was pleasant and constant, without highs and lows. I had enough to eat, I had a home, and I had enough pennies to afford the services of a wandering whore from time to time. I knew that, according to the holy verses, I would enter the eternal paths at the end of my days, my path trodden, my task fulfilled. But things turned out differently. After I had taken off my robes and warily laid down under the sheet of sheep's wool, I noticed a strange and dull feeling in my stomach. Today, I know that this unremarkable moment was the first time I encountered the fire. It was small, insignificant, and let me check if I'm still streaming. I am. Only a weak glow, but it was there. Different. However, on this gray morning, I was too tired to pay attention to it. Exhausted, I wrapped my sheet around myself and was fast asleep a moment later. I awoke in a dream. I found myself in an idyllic forest glade surrounded by green oak trees whose leaves moved gently in the wind. The setting sun stood at the horizon like a molten blaze and shone a red light over the scenery. I savored the spicy, fresh air, which tasted like wet moss, morning dew, and old secrets, mysterious, wild, and clear, like life itself. This guy needs to learn how to use periods right. In contrast to what we all know of the nightly journeys that we call dreams, I was fully aware of the unreality of the scenery, so I accepted it as it was natural as time's passing. I was stark naked as on the day of my birth, but I was not ashamed. On the contrary, I felt strong, clear, and free. When I took my eyes away from the sky and looked in front of me, I saw her. She stood in an old ruin that was overgrown with ivy and whose collapsed walls and arches told of ancient times. She wore a gray flowing robe that only allowed a glimpse of her femininity beneath. That sounds familiar. Her hood hung deeply over her face, so only the tender and delicate parts of her cheeks and chin were visible, a sight that could have stemmed from the imagination of a Quernian painter. Her dense, midnight black hair was tied into snake-like braids and fell down to her shoulders. Various things were interwoven in her hair, old faded coins that must have been minted by lost civilizations, small, finely polished bones from animals unknown to us, and strange ribbons whose colorful threads created an artful pattern. But it was none of this that hypnotized me and drew me toward the veiled figure in the ruin. It was her smile. With every step I took towards her, I fell deeper into its charm. It was not a lovely smile, as some might assume. It was a mixture of melancholy, rage, hope, and love, a symphony of contradicting feelings which I thought to be irreconcilable. It was a smile that was able to speak both great wisdom and orders that would mean the death of thousands. A smile born from the truths recognized in otherworldly existences. Cold sweat ran from my pores, and I felt how apprehensiveness mixed with the peaceful bliss of the moment just before. I came to a halt a few steps before her, still staring at her magical smile like a starving man at a feast. For a moment I believed to recognize the glimpse of mirth in her features, but it faded away as fast as it had appeared. Then she spoke. "You are dying, Jael." Her voice was rough and tender at the same time, full of contrast. She spoke without mockery, pity, or cruelty. "Why?" I heard myself respond mechanically. "I am in the best of health." My answer was as pathetic and clumsy as it must appear to the reader of these yellowed pages, but I spoke them faster than I was able to think, without control. The woman nodded steadily, as if she had expected this very response. "You affirm that you are of good health?" She paraphrased my words with a particular intonation. "But you fail to perceive the fabric of this world in all of its intricacy. Slowly and regretfully, she shook her head, like a magistra in the monastery school who got a foolish answer from a novice to a very simple question. Then she took her hands out of the robe sleeves and beckoned me to follow her. Even her walk had something of another world to it. Her body did not move with her steps, but seemed to float instead. We've met this lady. Silent and obedient, I followed her through the old ruin. Today, after I had gone through the vision in my thoughts many thousands of times, I know that it was an old trading post. The walls and rusty gate left no doubt about it, but in the vision I did not care about such banalities. To follow the figure in front of me was my sole purpose. She stopped in front of an old, overgrown tower, presumably once the heart of the ruin, and opened the cast-iron door, which swung inside in an eerie, silent manner. "Go, Jael," she said. "Go and perceive the truth." These were the last words I heard until the horrid discovery inside the ruin, for when I was about to reply, she was gone. For the first time, a feeling of uncertainty mingled with the confidence that I had had at the beginning of the vision. I was still aware of the fact that my physical body was lying on a bed in a modest chamber in another world. I also knew that I could decide to wake from the wonderful and terrible vision. Yet I did not. Why? I am unable to say. Was it out of curiosity? Was it the sense of fate that covered the ruin like a thin, transcendent sleeve? I don't know. I entered. The floor felt cold under my naked feet, and the dusty air that was only lit by a pale red sunbeam made me cough as it filled my lungs. This is the same bedtime story as last night. The inside was almost empty, except for spider webs, weathered furniture, and broken stones that had fallen from the crumbling walls. In the center, there was a wooden construction, an extraordinarily large, upright box. Hesitantly, I walked closer. A word came to my head, but faded from my mind as fast as it had appeared. I recognized how the fire of the setting sun was extinguished, and replaced by a dull blue. Gentle hazy fog began to cover the scenery, and everything that had been peaceful and blessed before I entered the ruin was replaced by a sense of trepidation, creeping, cold, wasting. My hand moved along the surface of the strange box, which was slightly taller than me, and the wood was decayed and gray, and an odd smell came from it, like iron. It was sweet and tempting, but at the same time resilient. "Leave," flashed through my head. "Leave before you inflame it." I was unable to determine if it was I who thought these thoughts, but of course I did not leave. Slowly, my hand moved towards a gap on the side of the box that allowed me to open its lid. As the hinge turned with a reluctant, mourning sound, I remembered the word that had slipped in my mind. This time it did not vanish. It persevered in all its dreadfulness. The wooden construction in the center of this abandoned ruin was no box. It was a coffin. Even today I can hardly find the right words for the terror that stared at me from the decomposing interior of the coffin. Without any doubt, the creature in front of my very eyes was myself. There it was, the brown hair thinning even at the age of 28. There it was, the well-trimmed, dense beard that grew down to my chest. The beard that I grew to hide my unremarkable, longish face. And there it was, the crooked nose, giving my face a vulture-like appearance, making me avoid my own reflection in the mirror. But the body in the coffin was dead, clenched like in the moment of dying. Denied, and like cattle, his head was pressed down to his shoulders by the small dimensions of the coffin, his unnatural posture a silent accusation. His body was pinched, his arms pressed to himself in a twisted manner. Much more gruesome, though, was his face. The skin was pale and had a greenish-gray color like decayed tombstones. There were many deep fissures that were not bleeding, but offered a view of bare flesh and white bones. The beard was curly and wild, and the maggots moved in the tangled mesh, oozing a festering, doughy liquid that was dripping down on the stone floor. The man's cheeks were hollow, and his lacerated lips were opened in a twisted way that gave the impression of a tormented smile. His teeth were rotten and his tongue gray, but none of this was the reason for the blood-curdling, panic-fueled cry that escaped my throat. It were the eyes, or rather, it was the place where the eyes should be on a healthy, living person. But there were no eyes. Weak and pale like shrouds, the lids, devoid of any sense, hung over gaping black sockets. Contradicting any logic, they seemed to stare at me, whispering, rotting and dead. The same festering liquid in the man's beard trickled down the brows and disappeared into the empty eye. No, no words can describe the terror that filled me when I looked at that deformed creature. In panic, I hit the withered copy of myself, but I only loosened the body so it fell right towards me. I felt how the repellent, festering corpse water from the beard touched my lips, while a handful of maggots landed on my shoulder. But for a short moment I was petrified. I held myself in my arms like a twin his own deceased brother, but this was no twin. When the maggots tried to move up my neck, I pushed the corpse away with a shrill cry, wiped away the maggots, and fled from the ruin. This is a little bit of a scarier bedtime story than last time, Kirby. Meanwhile, night had fallen and the full moon stood cold, white, and unmoving in the sky. The veil of mist which had formed inside the ruin faded as soon as I came outside and let myself drop to the ground, crying and breathing heavily. "I am dead," flashed through my mind again and again. "Dead!" I uttered in a panicky scream. A pitiful effort to banish the madness from my mind. The terror remained. It was omnipresent, and I felt bitter tears making their way through my eyes. What, by the righteous path, does it mean? What kind of nightmare am I trapped in? Some might ask why I did not end the vision with the well-known physical stimulus by pinching myself. Even more so because I was fully aware of the uncertainty of what was happening. The answer is, I was unable to do it, and I knew it. What I went through was not one of the usual nightly phantasms that occasionally haunt us in the quiet hours. Something that I later began to understand. At least a little wanted to show me something, and I was unable to escape the truth. As little as a man can escape the sands of time. As I turned my gaze from the floor and started to crouch towards the stone arch in the forest, weeping helplessly, I saw her again. The veiled woman. She stood above me and stared down at me, almost with sympathy. At least I assumed so, because despite the angle of my view, I was unable to recognize anything above her cheeks but the unnatural shadow of her hood. "What are you?" I brought forth in a weak voice. "What, by the Black Guardian's name, are you? A demon? An angel of death?" It sounded pathetic, like the lament of a desperate child. "You ask me what I am?" she answered, again an echo of my pitiful words. "And you assume I am a black angel of your god, come upon you to punish you, but—" a touch of material tenderness accompanied her rough voice. "You ask the wrong question, Jael. For who I am is not of importance." I stared at her in confusion, unable to react to her enigmatic answer. I remained on the ground for a while, motionless, breathing frantically and panically, looking at the veiled woman. After what felt like an eternity, I asked the question that needed to be asked. And what is the right question? Briefly, I saw what seemed to be a sad smile caress her red lips. "You inquire from me what only you can answer," she said, and began to move towards the stone arch. "And I wish to give you some advice." She halted, looking like an unreal shape in the silver of the moonlit night. "An advice on how you can avoid the death of your soul." There was a moment of silence. "End your false life and follow the fire." And then the vision broke apart. Well, Kirby, and also Squiddy, and also Dawn, when y'all were here, thanks for coming out. And Kirby, thank you for listening to my spooky bedtime story. Hopefully, the next one won't be as spooky. Um, thanks for coming out and watching, and I hope you have a good night. Bye bye.